Hello, you beautiful little marketing bees. You're tuned into episode 81 of the Marketing Buzzword Podcast.
This is the Marketing Buzzword Podcast, the podcast where we dissect the world's most common marketing buzzwords. Hold on tight. We are about to fly around the beehive to see the latest buzzwords that stuck to the marketing bees.
Hello again and welcome back to the Marketing Buzzword Podcast. This is a podcast which helps you to understand what all these business and marketing buzzwords actually mean and how they can be helpful or not going forward. I'm your host Ben Roberts, and in this show I am the marketing bee in charge of making sure I can get on the right guests and ask the right questions to make sure these words and phrases actually make sense. And today's show we're going to do something a little bit different, and we're going to dive into the psychology of buzzwords, which I've actually taken and extracted from my upcoming book, Marketing Buzzwords Marketing Authority. And this is a thing that when I sent this out to people to pre-read and to get an idea to see if this was, if they were enjoying the book, this is the chapter that every single one came back and said, whoa, this is really, really good stuff. So I really wanted to share that with you as a pure episode on the psychology of buzzwords, because we've talked a lot about buzzwords, but we haven't necessarily driven down into the what and the why in so much of the mental, why we actually do it, the psychological rationale for them. So that's what we're going to do today. And this podcast is powered by Talkative. Talkative is a company that brings together live web chat, web calling, video calling, and co-browsing together in one package embedded into your website. It allows you to receive so much more customer data, such as the customer journey, where they've been on the website, how long they spent, and doesn't stretch your resources any further. It allows you to provide a more personalized human customer service. And one final thing before we get on into the meat of this week's topic. If you are loving the show, please do feel free to leave a review on iTunes or go to marketingbuzzword.com, have a look at all the past episodes on there, and maybe even take a look at the book page, which the book will be coming out, next week. Here we go. So, let's get on with the show. Okay, so as I said in the intro, today we're going to look at the psychology of buzzwords. And this episode I've taken as a sort of an excerpt from my upcoming book. And it really looks at sort of the psychology. So we're going to look at sort of a little bit about what the psychology is. We're going to dive into something called herd mentality. We're then going to look at something called tribal vocabulary. And we're then going to look at something called social transmission. And what the idea of this is, we're going to look at why we actually use buzzwords, how they actually spread or why they don't spread. And I think this is a fascinating topic that I could try and cover in the book. So I think it's really important that we understand why we do things and why some will grow, others won't. And I think this is really important for us to understand. Actually, when I try and put across this strategy and this idea that I want people to look at buzzwords from a different angle, then actually this is sort of the crux of it. So, let's get on with it. So, the psychology and rationale behind buzzwords is a particular fascination of mine, and one that, from speaking to other people in business, other people are also interested in. In this chapter of the book, I'm going to take you on a deep dive into some of the psychological rationale behind the use of buzzwords, and the difference that we can make to how the buzzword you use and how you can align yourself to it. This will include things like herd mentality, social transmission, and tribal vocabularies. So, herd mentality. In all likelihood, you would have heard of the terms maybe sheep mentality, herd mentality, or mob mentality. They're all slight variations on the same idea, and ultimately look at how individual people are influenced by their peers or by a single person to adopt certain behaviors. So the definition of herd mentality is the tendency of people to behave in the same way as others who are similar to them. This could be driven either by a single individual or by a group of individuals. Now, to give this definition some clarity and some context, here is an example that I use. Now, the idea is that if you use a group of selectively bred dogs, so in this case, sheepdogs, these dogs are the influencers and the thought leaders in a large field, so a niche, so a field. In this field, there are loads of sheep. These are what you call potentially your everyday marketers. Now, I'm not saying that all everyday marketers are sheep, but this is the context I'm trying to give. Each have their own personalities, thoughts, and want to explore different parts of the field. They're not necessarily always working together, they have to stay with each other all the time. They have their own ideas. But in this field, the sheepdogs are the influencers, and they affect where the sheep move. Every single influencer can have a significant impact upon the dynamics of the whole market, and the whole sheep and herd will react accordingly. So if the sheepdogs want to do nothing, the sheep can roam everywhere. If these influencers say, actually, look, we want you to go and have a explore this part of the field, they could easily influence the herd to say, look, you want to move into this part of the field, and people will follow, and people will lead because they follow those influencers. Now, taking this example back into the real world, when you build authority around a niche topic or a buzzword, you're able to influence the marketers and business people within that area. That's because you're an authority. When you do this by giving value and sharing knowledge, people want to follow and learn from you. This is you influencing the herd. The amount of authority you have relates to how many marketers you can influence. That's where influencer marketing is often done wrong. It's not about the numbers or the followers. It should never have been about the numbers. It's about the quality and authority. It's the very reason that I want you guys to buy this book when it comes out, because a byproduct of authority and influence is a large audience. But actually, the first and foremost thing is you've got to build authority where people are going to look for you for guidance, because that's really what it's all about. Remembering all the way through, it's not about you. It's never about you. You're trying to take the marketers to the places that they didn't think they could go to, didn't think they would never find by themselves. You as an influencer will take them to that place. Now, there's this thing called tribal vocabulary as well. Tribal vocabulary looks at how individuals such as academics, consultants, and increasingly social influencers are driving tribalism in terms of using specific terminology to create almost private languages that resonate with a small subset of people. Again, notice that. So we're talking about private languages with a small subset of people. It's not about the numbers. It's this tribal language that causes the biggest divisions in terms of how people use and perceive jargon and buzzwords. This is because of the assumption that whoever is reading the text or content is already familiar with the terms and phrases that you are subjecting the reader to. Or, even more wrongly, the problem of the author of the content writing in a way that's so obscure and so full of technical jargon without context that could even be apprehended by the most studious of readers. Essentially what it means is when things become so full of jargon that no one, even people who want to understand, can't understand it. There's no context. It's just meaningless words. These two issues are the primary drivers of the backlash against buzzwords. On a more positive note, though, this is flexible. It's not set in stone, as you'll see throughout the entirety of the book. It's possible to build a business off the back of a buzzword. So how do we overcome this then? How do we as marketers try to build our brand and align ourselves with something that's quite clearly divisive and turn a buzzword into something that we can own? At a high level, a few words could suffice. And they go a bit like this. Don't be that person that alienates his or her audience by not keeping things simple. Don't make readers have to work hard to understand you. Kiss them. Not literally, but by keeping it simple, stupid, or silly, whichever word you want to use. I'm not saying dumb things down, but write in a way that's easy to process and understand. If you want people to resonate with you and your content, you have to appeal to them and reduce the number and size of your barriers to entry. Yeah, when you add loads of words in there that have no context, have no meaning, you're increasing your barriers to entry. You're not helping people to understand you and resonate with you. Buzzwords don't work and catch on when you don't introduce the idea and define the term to your audience. When you use buzzwords without introducing the idea and defining the term, you leave room for assumption. Assumption is rarely good, and something that we've always been taught since our earliest years not to do. Hence, this analogy, to assume makes an ass out of you and me. Or to quote a Steven Seagal movie, assumption is the mother of all fuck-ups. The point is, just because you have seen the word or phrase used before and have a clear idea in your own head, you cannot assume that the same level of familiarity from your audience, or until you've taught them it. Now, we take it down to another level now to examine the more psychological and rationale and the arguments around the use of jargon and buzzwords. During the process of writing this book and studying as much as I could about buzzwords, jargon, and psychology, I came across some really interesting work from the Associate Professor of Technical Communication at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, a guy called Russell Hurst. In his teachings, he specifically looked at jargon and buzzwords and gave them two potential meanings. The first, the specialized language of a trade, discipline, or profession. And number 2, the pretentious, excluding, evasive, or otherwise unethical and offensive use of specialized vocabulary. Now, the first of the definitions looks at buzzwords from a sentence level, where their creation and usage is driven by the need to define something or categorize something to a specific trade, discipline, or profession. This is because up to this point, no word or phrase suitably covers what is trying to be conveyed. This is the evolution of language. The second definition focuses on the emotional and immediate negative reaction to new words that are unfamiliar or lack meaning to the individual. It looks at the issue identified at the beginning of this chapter concerning the use of jargon and buzzwords as barriers to entry. Now, the problem with the second definition is that it implies the audience are already assuming a buzzword to always be negative from the outset, when in reality we all use buzzwords almost daily, and almost certainly regularly. Some definitely more than others, but in the real world they are widely used and they can be very helpful. Remember that we aren't talking about terms like circle back, low-hanging fruit, or streamlining, but instead terms like user-generated content, machine learning, and humanization. These are the terms that we're defining, and they bring shared ideas together. These shared ideals and philosophies may or may not stand the test of time. Language is a constantly evolving beast, with words, terms, and phrases constantly changing in and out of popularity and usage. Some rise to the top, and others fade into the abyss. Don't worry, we'll cover some of this later in the chapter. One of the interesting areas that I have looked into, some real soul searching for this book, is the deliberate use of buzzword as a blocker to market entry. The reason I've had to do so much thinking about this, because it's quite easy to see the negative side, the side that's blocking everyone from knowing more about the industry, and one that excludes lay public. But what if we're looking at this the wrong way? What if those perceived negatives aren't actually negatives, are in fact good? I can see, you're intrigued, I can tell. So, stay with me on this. We talk about the idea that terms we use in business and marketing mean nothing to general public, or that ordinary people don't use those terms in their lives. An example of this might be content and content marketing. Lay public don't use or don't know what the term means, but for those of us in the industry, it really holds sway. Does it really matter that people outside the industry don't use the term? Does it matter that they don't refer to a blog or video as great content? No. They also don't really want to refer to things as content. They would rather keep things simple. There is no burning desire or appetite for general public to lap up marketing buzzwords and industry jargon. They don't care what the latest and greatest buzzword is. Basically, this means that these excuses we make as marketers for not using buzzwords for fear of excluding people could actually be nonsense. In fact, it's a way of preserving boundaries so that not everyone is speaking the same language and their industries maintain their uniqueness. Therefore, it can be argued that the negative perception of exclusion is actually a positive, and that buzzwords can and should be used in order to keep those people out of the industry who don't actually want to be in it. In addition, it also helps to ensure that people using certain words and phrases are recognized as being aligned to that industry. In effect, industry buzzwords could help us identify whether someone else works in marketing or not, and help us understand their level of knowledge. This, of course, could be a false reality, because anyone can spout buzzwords. It doesn't mean they know the industry. However, it at least excludes the possibility that they have no interest or no desire to be in the industry, because they have taken the time to begin to learn industry-specific jargon and terminology. Now, social transmission. Social transmission is the final important psychological factor that we need to uncover in our pursuit of building a brand or business brand around a buzzword. The definition of social transmission is the transfer of information or behaviors throughout a group of organisms. This includes verbal and non-verbal communication, actions, beliefs, knowledge, and behaviors. Social transmission is not exclusive to humans. It is seen throughout the animal kingdom and is one of the oldest and most primitive forms of information dissemination. Animals use social transmission in its most primal form to share information about predators, food, and danger. Whereas in humans, social transmission has developed more into the sharing of ideas, cultures, knowledge, and, of course, language. For the purposes of this book, we are going to look primarily at the transmission of language. Language is constantly evolving. New words are constantly being added, whilst others drop off the radar. Some words catch on and either end a mainstream vocabulary, whilst others language. There are also words and phrases which change in their meaning over time. This is what makes it really confusing to understand and keep on top of. Social transmission also isn't entirely simple, and there are a number of schools of thought which academics and industry experts often refer to. They all agree that social transmission is frequent, and it has important ramifications for language and development. What they can't quite agree on is why certain things are widely shared and spread like wildfire, whilst others almost disappear into the ether and barely get any engagement. Notice the buzzword. The first school of thought looks at the role of small network structures and what they play in diffusion and information and vocabulary. This looks at how small groups, i.e. friendship groups, or group messaging, or localized networks such as schools and offices, help words to catch on. The closer you are in proximity to a word being used, and the more frequently you hear it, the more likely you are to assimilate it into your own vocabulary. Think of it this way. Do you speak to someone so often that you start using their own, engaging and using their own mannerisms? Do you read someone's content so often that you start to use the same words and terms that they do? This school of thought has a lot of gravitas, because it looks at how people who have shared an environment or have shared interests where communication is prevalent and peers learn off peers. The downside to this, though, is it doesn't address how this diffusion process starts off. It doesn't look at individuals as individuals and the impact they have on social groups. This is where the second school of thought comes to the fore. The second school addresses the idea of certain special individuals within groups, whether through their position or social network, could be largely influential in the dissemination of a new and evolved language. These special individuals are what you and I will more commonly refer to as thought leaders, influencers, or social connectors. These are people or brands are respected amongst their peers and their given industry and proven to be integral in driving behavior. What this means is that a small subset of socially powerful people are far more likely to be able to coin their own buzzwords because of their ability to influence others through social transmission. Now, whichever school of thought you most subscribe to, there is a commonality to both. The common theme is that you need a group of influenceable individuals who will incorporate new words and terminology into their everyday vocabulary. In order for your given buzzword to enter mainstream usage, it needs a critical mass of people to use it on a regular basis. There is no one way to success because the human brain is complex, and as individuals we all process thoughts and words in different ways. However, what can't be argued with is the impact that social transmission has on the creation and growth of a buzzword's popularity. If a buzzword is simple to convey, has clear context, then it will have a greater chance of entering wider circulation because there are less assumptions in order to hinder adoption. A website that helps contextualize these new words and phrases is a website called Urban Dictionary. Now, if you often hear of a new word or phrase being used that you've never heard before in sort of everyday sort of street words, there's a good chance it's on Urban Dictionary. What's great about this website is it doesn't just define a word, it adds context. It gives you examples of how and where people are likely to use the word and phrase. This means that every person who is trying to understand not only what that word means, they can also discover the ways in which to use it. This context means that there is little excuse for people not to use a word because they don't know what it means. Understanding the psychology of why some buzzwords catch on and why others don't is incredibly important in you choosing your own buzzword to align yourself with. When you advance past this chapter, you need to keep remembering to keep things simple, give context, find influencers, and start using the word and phrase within your small networks. That will give any buzzword the best chance of resonating across your industry. Now, I hope you found that as interesting as I'd like. For me, I wanted to keep that short, sweet, and to the point. I really wanted to share with you the world of buzzwords and the psychology around them because they are really important. And if you understand why people share and some of the nuances around the psychology of it, I feel like you can use a buzzword in order to grow your business. And this is the context that I try and set out in the book. The idea of aligning yourself to a buzzword, teaching it, adding context, becoming the source of information around that highly used term or a word that you've created yourself. When you understand why people would use it, why it would resonate with people, you're able to create content that really helps people. It really helps people to understand it, and then they will share it, and then you become seen and regarded as a marketing authority in that space. I really hope you enjoyed it, and if you have, please do leave a review on iTunes. Please also go to marketingbuzzword.com/book. Also just look on marketingbuzzword.com for the book page, and please sign up and get ready because the book is coming very, very soon. So if you really liked sort of this chapter, then please buy a copy of the book when it comes out. And I'm really excited for this book to come out. So if you want to know more, please do buy a copy. Thank you very, very much for listening. I'll be back on Monday with another guest episode. Goodbye.
This podcast is part of the You Are the Media Network.